Friday afternoon, we have some new stuff to talk about. That's always great in a week with no OTA practices, no 49ers media availability. Matt Barrows, my colleague, got in touch with Jeff Christensen, formerly Jimmy Garoppolo's quarterback coach. They probably still do some work together, but he was Jimmy's original guy back when Garoppolo was in high school in the Chicago area. Now Jeff Christensen has a long list of NFL clients that also includes Patrick Mahomes and this man. You might be interested in his progress, Trey Lance. Trey Lance has been working with Jeff Christensen. That is the article from Matt Barrows. It's up on The Athletic. The interview with Jeff about what Trey has been doing. And remember that this is something that we were on top of a couple months ago when we saw the first videos of Trey Lance's work with Jeff Christensen and Patrick Mahomes come out. And I made the side-by-side. Why don't we watch the side-by-side right now? The throwing motion of Trey Lance. It has tightened up. It's gotten better. And as you can see, well, that video here, let's put this on one more time. I'm going to add it to the stream. Here we go. Now you can see Trey on that right side. As you can see, the left side is training camp this past season. The right side is Trey. That's Jeff Christensen, by the way, in the background. On the right, white beard, watching his pupil. You could see that the release is tighter, quicker. The ball is out. You don't have that looping motion that was causing Trey Lance a lot of trouble in the past. It made him a much less efficient quarterback because if you take half a second longer to get rid of the football, guys and windows are going to close. Two, you're more prone to turnovers. Look how low this football is coming. Look how far back Lance is reaching it. Those edge rushers in the NFL, they're so skilled these days. They're going to prey on that. And three, there was some arm soreness that was coming to Trey Lance because his motion was so elongated and so inefficient. It wasn't good physically for his arm. Now, a lot of the mechanical issues happened because of a detour. And the detour was Lance breaking his finger in 2021. They knew, and I'm going to get into this, the longer sequence in a little bit, but the 49ers knew that Trey Lance needed mechanical work coming out of North Dakota State. He was very raw coming out of North Dakota State. But then he had the hairline fracture on his pinky against the Raiders in 2021, was never able to bend that pinky during the 2021 season. And I think that hurt the mechanics even more, which led to some of the arm soreness that we've talked about. And now he's tightened it up one more time. I know I'm playing this on repeat, but on the right side, you will see that ball. I mean, these videos are synced up time-wise. You're going to see the ball release from Trey Lance's hand much sooner than it does on the left. Look, it's already in the air on the right. That's significant. And it's finally released on the left. So anyway, this is the piece from Matt Barrows talking about Trey Lance, Patrick Mahomes, and I'm going to go through some of the key points. We're going to have a nice discussion about this key development in the 49ers offseason. It's something that Kyle Shanahan discussed last week. It's something that people laughed at. There are other channels that are like, oh, David Lombardi's playing this video of Trey Lance supposedly improving his throwing motion. That's ridiculous. Of course that didn't happen. Well, now you've got full 1,000 plus word articles from quarterback experts saying, oh yeah, we've been working on this guy's throwing motion. Of course we changed it. It took us 4 days to diagnose everything that was wrong with it. I mean, this is not rocket science. I don't understand why people have made this so controversial. But, you know, I wrote this on Twitter right here. This is a good summary of the situation. The 49ers drafted Trey Lance because they loved his quarterback's mental makeup, his athletic ability, his throwing potential, and personality. They knew that there was a lot of mechanical work to be done to bind all of those together. That's why it was clear they were keeping Jimmy Garoppolo from day one. I'm going to go back to that in a second. That's the first section of that tweet thread that I put together. But again, remember, a lot of people didn't act like it was clear that they were keeping Jimmy Garoppolo from day one when they drafted Trey Lance. I got attacked a lot on social media for saying that it was obvious that they were going to keep Jimmy Garoppolo. They kept him for not only 1, but 2 years. I know that second year was a different circumstance, but it was clear to me that A, they were going to draft Trey Lance, not Mac Jones, and B, that they were going to keep Jimmy Garoppolo because Lance was so raw coming out of college. Trey has fewer throws. This is including his NFL action, which hasn't been a lot over the past 2 years. But even including that NFL action, he has fewer throws since high school than Tom Brady had in one single season, his final season at age 45 in the NFL. That's how raw Trey Lance is. So it's always been, to me, patently obvious, and I think to the 49ers, patently obvious that this is going to be a longer-term developmental process, that the mechanical work would have to cross a bridge that it had not yet crossed because he simply didn't have enough experience. This was, again, an eminently raw prospect. So the 49ers kept Garoppolo, and in their plans, they were going to keep him for that entire first season because they wanted Lance to move toward his high ceiling. They wanted him to accentuate the stuff they loved about him, why they invested so much in him, the mental makeup, the athletic ability, the throwing potential, the personality. But they knew they would have to put in the mechanical work to get there. Now, the detours started coming early in year one. And here's the second part of the thread. Because it was obvious Lance would need time to develop toward what the 49ers see as a high ceiling. But in the time since the draft, Lance has A, suffered a finger fracture that significantly hampered his mechanical development. That was in year one, preseason against the Raiders. And B, an ankle fracture that eventually helped open the door for Brock Purdy. But Trey Lance's ceiling is still there. He's just 2 years further into his contract, and the 49ers have more QB options than they did prior to all these twists and turns. So this, my friends, is the simple 49ers Trey Lance timeline. It's not more complicated than that. Yes, they have more options now. It's not a bad thing for the 49ers. Brock Purdy is part of the mix. But the 49ers quarterback room is better when Trey Lance is in it. That's why all the trade stuff this offseason, noise. Yes, the 49ers would take a king's ransom, just like they would have taken a king's ransom for Deebo Samuel, but they were not going to get it for Trey Lance. And now they are going to get to see Trey try to carry over his mechanical improvement that Jeff Christensen talked about in this article with Matt Barrows into actual live action. OTAs begin on Tuesday. So one of the big things, one of the big keys for me, and it has been for Kyle Shanahan too, he's been on record saying this, is, when a quarterback makes mechanical improvements, when he tightens the release, when he improves the base, something that Trey has actually been able to do over the past few months because he's been healthy entering this offseason. The ankle injury wasn't as big of a deal to his throwing motion as the hairline fracture on the pinky, which actually lingered there for several months, led to the arm soreness, all that kind of stuff. But, when you look at the mechanical state that Trey Lance is in right now, that's all been constructed in a lab, right? He's working with Jeff Christensen. He's working alongside Patrick Mahomes. I mean, one of the cool things about this is that Trey, that delivery on the right in front of Jeff Christensen, he began to really figure it out after sitting right behind Patrick Mahomes. I'm going to go through some of those details in a little bit. Something clicked when he was watching Patrick. And he's able to do it against air without a pass rush right now. You see how pretty it is. You see how much better it is than the one on the left. But is he going to be able to perpetuate these mechanical improvements into live action? That's the biggest question. With OTAs beginning on Tuesday, we're going to see 11-on-11 football, and Trey Lance is going to see 11-on-11 football for the first time since he was hurt against Seattle last September. That's going to be a whole new challenge. Can he take what he's been doing mechanically and avoid a reversion to bad habits with 11 guys flying around the field? Now, it's going to be an easy step in. It's not going to be as tough as what's going to happen later on because A, pads won't be on, and B, Trey can't get touched, right? Quarterbacks are off limits during OTAs, during any practice. Once we move on to training camp, pads will be on. It's going to be a little bit faster. It's going to be more intense. QBs still can't be touched, but it will be another test to see if Trey Lance can avoid reverting back to bad habits and see if he can sustain his mechanical improvement. And then you're going to have the preseason when quarterbacks can actually be hit. So that's when you see quarterbacks who've worked on their mechanics all offseason in labs against air. That's when you see them revert back to bad habits. when there's actual quarterback contact, when an edge rusher can take their head off. Regular season's even more intense. So it's going to be a progressive series of intensifying tests for Trey Lance to see if his mechanics can withstand greater scrutiny and greater pressure. Patrick Mahomes, by the way, loves Trey Lance. So let's go back to Matt Barrow's article here. This is cool. There's some cool little nuggets in the piece. And they start with the fact that Trey picked up the mechanical improvements that he needed. He processed them logically in his brain right when he stood behind Patrick Mahomes. They're working out at TCU in Texas. But how about this? This is good stuff right here. And Jeff Christensen also likes Trey Lance. Christensen has coached nearly 200 college and NFL quarterbacks over his career, including Garoppolo, Kirk Cousins, and Ryan Tannehill. He said Lance reminded him of his most well-known client, Mahomes, in terms of competitiveness and demeanor. It's one of the reasons he had Lance and Mahomes train together during some of the sessions. Here's the quote. He really fit right in. Pat really thinks the world of him. He's just a really good person, conscientious. He wants to be great. And he's one of the few kids whose actions match his words. He backs it up. He shows up every day and he wants to learn. And that is why I teach him. So Pat really thinks the world of Trey Lance. And obviously, as you can see, so does Jeff Christensen. And this harkens back to something that we talked about when the 49ers drafted Trey. Some people are acting all surprised. Well, why did they pick him? And why did they trade up so much capital for him if he had to improve his mechanics? They didn't pick Trey to be a finished product. They picked him because he would be moldable clay. Kyle Shanahan wanted moldable clay. Kyle Shanahan wanted to design his own quarterback from the ground up. He needed the raw materials to do it. And Trey's got good athleticism. He loves his mental processing. That's a myth out there that Trey Lance can't process. I don't know where that comes from. It's been the mechanics that have been the needed bridge for Trey Lance. And, this goes back to my article last year. This is with Steve Young. This is going to be a good one to put up on the screen here in a second. I wrote this September 9th. Here you go. September 9th. 2022. So right before the season started. Why Steve Young thinks Trey Lance has the ingredients to be a successful 49ers quarterback. The mechanics have always been the necessary bridge for Trey Lance to cross to become a competent, efficient NFL QB. Remember that this started with Trey, I put this back up on the screen. The 49ers drafted Trey Lance because of his mental makeup, his athletic ability, his throwing potential. They knew that he had a strong arm, a cannon, but he needed to fix the spiral. He needed to fix the accuracy. The athletic ability was obvious, and personality. Personality was a big one. They loved the mental makeup of Trey Lance. They loved the fortitude that he showed, the swag. They thought that he could handle all of the wrenches that the quarterback position in the NFL throws at you. And because they thought that the mechanical work that had to be done would be something that would be possible to accomplish. It wouldn't be impossible to make big mechanical strides. Aaron Rodgers made big mechanical strides from Cal to Green Bay and now to the New York Jets, and he's on his way to the Hall of Fame whenever he's done, plus a few years. So it is possible to make big-time mechanical strides. You just have to have the mental makeup to do it. But it's always been the mechanics that have been the question mark with Trey Lance. And that's something that Steve Young talked about in this article, September 9th. It was a big, big piece that I wrote with Steve about Trey Lance. I mean, here's Steve. There he is, diving across the goal line against the Cowboys. His biggest win, right, before that Super Bowl, before Super Bowl 29. It's the NFC Championship game. There's Trey working with Jimmy Garoppolo. We had some training camp stats in there. I mean, this was all stuff that was common knowledge. The problem is that it's been put on the back burner, that mechanical improvement, because of injuries. But now Trey is healthy, so now he's working with Jeff Christensen. So now we can put this article up on the screen from Matt Barrows, and you should definitely go check it out. Patrick Mahomes loves Trey Lance. Watching Mahomes was what allowed Trey to make that key adjustment. And the adjustments now mean that Lance is not dealing with that arm soreness. Now, we talked about it so much on the channel. The way that arm fatigue was presented as if it was some kind of unconquerable hurdle, some kind of avant-garde problem, was ridiculous at the time, right? Any quarterback who hasn't thrown the football in an extremely long period of time, and Trey Lance dealt with that because of the finger injury, because of the longer layoff between college and the COVID year and the NFL. He dealt with arm soreness. But what happened is that arm soreness was exacerbated by mechanical issues of the variety that everybody was concerned about when Trey Lance entered the league. And Jeff Christensen has been able to eliminate the arm soreness by fixing the delivery. And if you want more evidence, we'll watch this again. The delivery is so much tighter, so much crisper. And that means that the question now is Lance going to be able to perpetuate these improvements into live action? Because on the left, you have him at training camp last year. That's before all this work. On the right, you have Trey Lance this offseason with Jeff Christensen himself. Jimmy Garoppolo had a super quick release. That was something that played really well in this yak-based 49ers offense. It's something they need Trey Lance to develop. That release needs to be quicker, not just for the timing of the offense, but also to avoid turnovers and to increase accuracy and to be in a position where his arm isn't hurting after intensive offseason work. And according to the article from Matt Barrows on Jeff Christensen, which is right here, the 49ers and Trey Lance have at least accomplished step one in that process. So it's fascinating stuff. Make sure you do check it out. That timeline is not complicated with Trey Lance either. It is a simple one. And it shouldn't be overcomplicated just because the 49ers have another capable quarterback or two now. It's a good thing for them. But they still love everything they loved about Trey Lance on day one. That's why it would take a lot for them to move off of him in a trade. And the thing that's changed since day one is that the door has been opened for Brock Purdy. He's the leader in the clubhouse to start. But to me, it's not a novel concept to say, what if all three of these quarterbacks, Lance, Darnold, and Purdy, are all good, are all beneficiaries of Kyle Shanahan's system and a really good 49ers roster? What a great problem to have. That'd be like the dynastic 49ers. You have a lot of good quarterbacks in the room. That's Kyle Shanahan's goal. There's nothing wrong with it. So many people are ego invested in being right. They've picked the horse in this battle. They're like, okay, I like Brock Purdy. I like Trey Lance. A few people really like Sam Darnold. And they just, want to only look at the data and only look at the evidence that says that guy's going to be the guy. Everybody else is going to be traded or whatever. They're going to ride the bench. And so people just go to war for one quarterback when the 49ers' goal is to have three good quarterbacks. The initial plan was that Trey Lance would be the guy, of course, but injuries derailed the first two seasons of that plan. The development mechanically has come slower. Then Brock Purdy fell into their laps. Give the scouting department some credit at number 262. There's nothing wrong with that. It's great for the 49ers. I think it's good for Trey Lance. Takes pressure off of Trey Lance despite the injuries to go out there and ball out right away. He could still work into the NFL the way that he was supposed to work into the league behind Jimmy Garoppolo. Everything will happen in due time the way that it's supposed to happen. Just how sports work. So that's the timeline. We're in the midst of it right now as we move forward into the 2023 season. What are you guys all talking about in the comments section? I'm very curious. Andrew says that he likes all three quarterbacks, and he thinks the 49ers record is going to be roughly the same no matter who starts. Well, we'll see. We really will. We still do need to see Trey Lance over a longer period. Sam Darnold was good over the 6 games to close last year, but nowhere near as good as Brock Purdy. Purdy, though, is coming off the elbow injury. There's so many variables. I don't like to make proclamations, but I see where you're coming from. How can you be critical when he hasn't played enough? Well, am I being critical or am I just being realistic? I don't know where you're coming from, or if you're talking to somebody else, or maybe you're talking about Mike Martz. But my stance with Trey Lance has always been the same. I recommended that the 49ers draft him. I predicted that the 49ers would draft him when hardly anybody else was predicting that in 2021. And I said keep Jimmy Garoppolo because Trey is going to need a lot of development time. That development time hasn't been gotten yet because of the two injuries, right? So to me, I'm just looking at Trey Lance and I see his weaknesses. I see that the mechanics aren't great or haven't been great, but they look a lot better now. And I think that he needs to show that he can carry them over into all 22 situations. It's as simple as that for me. So the black and white thinking, a quarterback is either great or he's trash, terrific or trash, right? The dichotomy, that's really unhealthy on social media, and it hasn't framed the whole Trey Lance experience correctly. This is a great way to put it. The 49ers have 3 shots at a superior quarterback when other teams only have 1 or 2, mainly just 1. It's a really good bet. Some teams don't even have 1 shot at a superior quarterback. The 49ers truly believe they have 3 shots, 3 dart throws at the wall at a bullseye. That's how you have to look at it. They really do think that. They're believers in Sam Darnold. Brock Purdy has done it already at a really high level, so he's obviously a candidate over a longer stretch. Yes, he has to come off the elbow and he has to prove it over a longer stretch. And they spent all that capital on Trey Lance because they believe he can do it too. Jim Brown passed away, huh? Wow, that's sad. R.I.P. Jim Brown, legendary running back. From Monique Brown. I'm going to put this up on the screen here. RIP Jim Brown. But we have a message from his wife. It is with profound sadness that I announce the passing of my husband, Jim Brown. He passed peacefully last night at our home in LA. To the world, he was an activist, actor, and football star. To our family, he was a loving and wonderful husband, father, and grandfather. Our hearts are broken. RIP to Jim Brown, the greatest to ever do it at the running back position. So the NFL world, it seems that there's never a day without another development. That's crazy. So with this whole Trey Lance situation, the next step is OTAs with 11 on 11 football. I'll be out there on Tuesday. I can't film 11 on 11 action, but I can film a lot. The stuff that matters is the mechanical improvement. So we're going to take a look at warm-ups. We're going to have video of that. And then I'm going to watch with my own eyes during 11 on 11 action to see where Trey Lance has improved or if he's, just regresses back to his original long looping motion once, there's an actual bit of a pass rush and live action. So that's the gist of OTAs. We're going to have 1 practice a week that we can look at up until veteran minicamp. We absolutely should judge practice stats. We should judge practice stats within the proper context. Guess what has correctly predicted the 49ers quarterback situation in both of the past 2 seasons? Accuracy rate in practice. Trey Lance was under 50% last year. Trey Lance had big time accuracy issues as soon as the season started. Trey Lance the year before, volatile, up and down. He had some accuracy issues during the season. Brock Purdy, accurate during camp last year. He was accurate during the season. You are who you are, right? Practice, how you practice is generally going to be how you play. There's no reason to ignore data. We could take the data that we have, use the observations that we have, and then contextualize them. It's only a situation where we're intentionally trying to be stupid, where we say, oh, hey, let's not use practice data. Of course, we're going to use practice data, but we're also going to be smart about using the practice data, and we're going to contextualize it so that we can see if Trey Lance's accuracy has become better. I use the eye test, I use tape, and I use a numerical quantification of the eye test to figure out and fairly judge where these individual quarterbacks are. I was at practice. Were you? Salty cyclist. Purdy was throwing it downfield. Purdy was doing fine. Jimmy Garoppolo was good in practice. He was fine. He had some bad days, kind of like Tom Brady had some bad days too. I'm sure Aaron Rodgers had some bad days. Just because you like to click on stuff on Twitter and you like the hot takes in either direction. Oh, Jimmy Garoppolo threw a bunch of interceptions today. You think that that covered all the practices? No. Jimmy was generally good in practice. He was a lot better than Trey Lance in 2021. He didn't practice in 2022 because he was off on the side field. In 2022, Lance was up and down. Mike will tell you, Mike was at one of the practices that was really, really bad for Trey Lance. The very next day, he was really, really good. He was inconsistent. The accuracy wasn't there. The point is that what we saw in practice ended up being what happened on the field. So Jimmy Garoppolo, solid in practice, ended up solid on the field. Trey Lance, up and down in practice, a little bit inaccurate, up and down, a little bit inaccurate on the field. That's the book on Trey Lance right now. The book on Trey Lance also is that the 49ers hope that that ceiling can be reached. They think that ceiling's really high. So I've been at every practice. I've honestly reported these things. Just because some of the stuff doesn't fit what you want it to fit doesn't mean that you can change reality. Truth actually still matters in these situations. Birdie was really good in preseason. Greg Papa and I think both talked about it a lot on the radio. We said this guy Purdy can play coming out of the preseason. There's a reason why they cut out a spot on the 53-man roster for him. Now, he wasn't ready right away. It's a good thing they had Jimmy, but he was ready once Jimmy went down. So right now, Purdy's better than Trey Lance. The question is, if Trey Lance can port his mechanical improvement into live action, he can resurpass Purdy. That's why we shouldn't be looking at this as one quarterback against all the other guys. I'm going to pick my guy, screw all the other guys. That is just so asinine because the 49ers aren't looking at it that way. They want multiple options at quarterback so that at least one of these guys turns out to be a plus thrower. And if more of them are plus throwers, that's better for the franchise, right? 3 good quarterbacks is better than 1 good quarterback. 2 is better than 1. Same deal, right? So there's way too much tribalism here in these quarterback battles. I don't understand why people are feuding over this when it's clearly a good thing for the 49ers. If Trey Lance is good, if Brock Purdy heals well, and if Sam Darnold sees a career revitalization in San Francisco. Randy Dotona cares about results and nothing else. Who are some players I'm wanting to watch in OTAs? What am I looking for? That's a good question. Mike, I might want to get back to that. I might want to make a separate. Ooh, just knocked over my mic. I want to make a separate video about that just because I want to give some good, detailed, thoughtful answers. But I like that from Mike. You're asking why take Kyle's word for what? I'm looking through some of these questions. This is obvious. Why did Kyle choose Trey? Because they weren't planning to keep Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, what are we even doing here with some of these questions? Are you serious? They're planning to keep Jimmy for 1 year because he was the better option than Trey in the short run. And then they were going to move on to the rookie quarterback contract to save money because they could no longer afford to keep Jimmy Garoppolo, who didn't even participate in training camp. And they were going to develop Trey Lance on the fly. That was the plan. That's why Trey Lance started. They got lucky that Jimmy Garoppolo re-signed with them on a discount so they could fit him on the roster. And then they had to go to Jimmy in week 2. I mean, I don't understand why this is rocket science to people. The plan from the very start was to shoot for the stars by drafting multiple Clay and Trey Lance, having him learn under Jimmy Garoppolo for one season, have him take over in 2022 because you assume that you wouldn't be able to afford Jimmy in 2022. But that all went out the window when Jimmy suffered his shoulder injury and had to undergo surgery because they could no longer trade Jimmy. But that ended up being a good thing for the 49ers because they were able to re-sign him at a discount. And that ended up being a really good thing for the 49ers when Trey Lance got hurt 2 weeks into the season. I mean, it was a very logical progression of events. And I think this question of yours goes back to, why are you saying that Trey looked bad in practice and Jimmy looked good? Because I'm telling you the truth. Jimmy Garoppolo was always better and has always been a better quarterback than Trey Lance. The area where Trey can surpass Jimmy is the future. He's got a higher ceiling. At least the 49ers think that. Will he ever reach it? I don't know. I'm talking about the possibility of him reaching it because stuff like this is promising. Stuff like this, that's a lot of improvement in just a few months. A quicker release is promising. Now, if Trey can port that over into the future, great. Because that's going to allow the 49ers to say, yeah, we made a good investment here. But we don't know if they've made a good investment. Thankfully, they got some insurance on their investment when they stumbled into Brock Purdy at number 262. All right. Cool stuff. 30-minute show. That's good. I'm going to be back on with a little bit more. But for now, go ahead and RIP Jim Brown. We have this up on from Monique Brown. This happened just a little while ago. So I'm going to go ahead and share this on Twitter. Be sure to check out the piece on Trey Lance from Matt Barrows. That is up on The Athletic. Everybody, thanks for joining. Hopefully I answered some questions. The mechanical improvement is something that we will watch to see if Trey Lance can perpetuate over the course of the next few months as it becomes more difficult to do so. But good news for the 49ers, good news for Trey. And I think it's fascinating news in that he's been working with both Jeff Christensen and Patrick Mahomes to take care of what we have long known to be the big missing piece in his development.